Hey everybody, welcome to U3-L7, the Persian Wars. So, learning targets today, students can reason why Persia wanted to take over Greece, explain the Battle of Marathon, explain the Battle of Thermopylae, explain the Battle of Salamis and the Greek Trireme, and explain the aftermath of the Persian War with Athens. Your job, you're going to watch this ed puzzle and answer the questions. The questions that I just want to answer on the ed puzzle will be in blue text. Make sure you're following along in your study guide. Important concepts on the study guide will be in red text. And of course, if you have any questions, you can email me or Mrs. Hinkle or stop by our office hours. All right, so this week's information I need to cover is not to be taught within a week. So this is kind of information overload. So there's a lot of information coming your way. So prepare yourself. But my first question for you, just answer this on the Ed puzzle. What do you remember about the Persian Empire? So you might remember the location of it. So remember it's where like modern day Iran is, and that it spread all the way to India, all the way to Anatolia. We talked about how it even spread a little bit into Europe. And then today we'll learn about how it took over parts of Greece. Oh, and it also took over parts of Egypt. Okay, so again, it's also called the Achaemenid Empire. It was from 559 to 334 BCE. It had famous rulers like Cyrus the Great, Darius the First, and Xerxes. And it ended in 334 BCE when Alexander the Great conquered Persia. And again, we'll talk about Alexander the Great in the next, not the next ed puzzle, the one after that. So, all right. So we are going to talk about the Persian War. So this is kind of why I talked about Persia as like the first thing, and then we talked about Greece. Now we're going to talk about both of them. So the Persian Wars took place from 499 to 449 BCE, and that's where the Persian Empire is simply just taking over land. They're creeping closer to the Greek borders. Persia takes over Anatolia, also called Ionia, in 499 BCE. And there are two city states, Athens and Eritrea. They want to help the Anatolians and the Ionians in battling the Persia because they're like, hey, Anatolia and Ionia are kind of like our neighbor borders. So if they get taken over, it's like free reign for the Persians to come in and take over our land. So let's help them out to try to stop the Persians so then the Persians don't come near us. The Persians did end up winning. And the Persian ruler Darius is super duper mad at Athens and Eritrea for helping Anatolia and Ionia. So to kind of show a map, so this is Anatolia right here in kind of that lighter green color. So you can just see just across the sea, we have Greece. So here's Athens right here, and here's Eritrea. So you can see that they're pretty close when it comes to city states, because remember, Sparta is like way down here. Okay, so in 490, Darius sent his army to punish Eritrea and Athens. He also was like, hey, once we're done with Eritrea and Athens, we're just going to take over all of Greece. So the Persians first went to Eritrea, and the Persians absolutely dominated, and they took over Eritrea. And then the Persian armies sent their army via ship to take over Athens. So this comes to something called the Battle of Marathon, which is one of the most famous ancient battles. So again, you can see Athens is right here. Marathon is just on the very other side of the peninsula of Athens. And you can see where like the Persian army would be coming from Anatolia right here, sailing their ship across the sea to Marathon. So Persians and Athens army meet outside a town called Marathon in 490 BCE, which again is on the way to Athens. It is a very hilly region. Here's a picture of what it looks like. So you can see a lot of mountains and valleys. There was a lot of limited paths to Athens because of this, because climbing over mountains is hard. So Athens is actually able to block the Persian army from going through the paths, and the Persians are forced to retreat. So the Athens win that. Right before the Battle of Marathon, Athens sent a message to Sparta for help. because they're like, oh my gosh, I actually don't know if we're going to defeat the Persian army. Let's ask Sparta to help us out. The runner with this message's name is Phidippides, and legend has it he ran 140 miles from Athens to Sparta within a day. He comes to Sparta and he's like, help, Athens need your help. Sparta, come help us. And Sparta was like, nah, we're on a religious holiday. We can't come. So that really kind of made Athens and Sparta mad at each other. Um, Also, a legend about it is after Athens beats the Persians, Phidippides runs to Athens to share the news of victory. And it is about 26 miles from Marathon to Athens. And Phidippides says, we've won. And then he just collapses and he just dies. So today, Modern Olympics has a marathon, which is about 26 miles. So that's where the name marathon comes from, is because of Phidippides running to spread the messages that Athens had won against the Persians. All right, so that's not the end of the Persians versus Greeks. So Darius is super duper duper mad that he lost. But he doesn't invade Greece again. He actually dies in 486 BCE. But his son Xerxes, so as a young boy, he saw all this defeat and his dad being really angry. So Xerxes wants revenge. Um, so this is coming into the Battle of Thermopylae. Next lesson, you will actually watch like kind of a reenactment of it. It's from the History Channel. It's super cool of what happens at the Battle of Thermopylae, and this video does a pretty good job at it. But I'll explain it here as well. One thing that is really good to know is something called the Hellenic League, and that is like a Greek city-states all band together and become allies. So you can kind of sort of think it as like, like NATO, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, like we have in modern days, where like it's a bunch of countries that come together and they're all allies. It's what kind of the Hellenic League is. So the Battle of Thermopylae. So Xerxes, who reigned from 486 to 465, sent out a huge military to take over Greece, right? He wants revenge because his dad lost. Um, this military campaign is by both land and sea. Claimed he had millions and millions of soldiers, but historians really estimated anywhere between 120,000 to 300,000 soldiers, which is still really huge if you think about it. Because remember, during your Athens and Sparta reading, Athens had what, like 140,000 in their whole city? So think of an army even greater than that. Um, and Athens had about 13,000 soldiers at the most. Yeah, so Persia had at least 10 times that. All right, so Persian soldiers really wanted to go to the south of Athens, and invade that way. But what happened is that Sparta and Athenian soldiers were like, hey, they're going to probably attack us from the south. Let's block them there. So 7,000 Spartan and Athenian soldiers met them at the Strait of Thermopylae. So you can see right here, here's the Strait of Thermopylae. Okay, here's Sparta, here's Athens. Here's like the Persian army. They'd be coming in from the north and kind of looping around and coming in this way. So here's my next question for you. Here is a photo of like like an artist rendition of what the land is like for the Battle of Thermopylae. Okay, so what do you notice in this picture about the Strait of Thermopylae? So the Strait of Thermopylae is very, very, very narrow. It is 300 feet across. It is 4 miles long. And there is no alternative route, right? It's just straight up mountain cliffs, like you can see here. Of course, this is kind of like a big painting, but you can see that there's no climbing up these hills. This is a sheer cliff. And if you fall off the cliff towards the sea, you're going into the water and you're going to die. So it is quite the place to have a battle. So this takes place in 480 BCE. There are 7,000 Spartans and other ally soldiers who try to stop the Persian advancements on the Strait of Thermopylae. They are all led by the Spartan king. His name is Leonidas. Here is a statue of him. It is a 3-day battle. Leonidas knew that he was going to lose. He told most of the Spartan and the ally soldiers just to retreat and to block the Persians from catching up to the retreating soldiers. Leonidas and his 300 fellow Spartans would stay behind and try to block the Persian army from advancing to give his allies a little bit more time. So, again, the video that you'll watch next will show the reenactment of the battle. But it's really famous because Leonidas and the 300 Spartans battled 10,000 Persians. Like, come on, the odds are so stacked against them. And Xerxes sent his special forces against the 300 as well. So not only were the Leonidas and the Spartans battling just any old army, they were battling like the best of the best in the Persian army. The best of the best were called the Immortals. Those were Xerxes' special bodyguards, and they were the best of the soldiers, and they're very heavily armed. Here's a relief of the Immortals. So you can see here they have like spears, they have bows, they have arrows, they have armor on. Pretty cool. So Leonidas and the 300, uh, the reason why they lasted 3 days is because they made the phalanx. And a phalanx is a tactical position for battle. And it's usually made of hoplite soldiers, like we talked about a few days ago, right? Those are citizen soldiers, mostly farmers. They are trained. They're not super elite soldiers because their main job is to be farmers. But the phalanx was like the number one thing they did. And what a phalanx is where soldiers stand side by side with shields overlapping and spears sticking out of the gaps, just like you see up here in the photo. And it was a giant wall of shields and spears. It was very, very hard to break. So here's some different angles of a phalanx. So you can see here's a side angle, here's a front angle. So Leonidas and the 300 lost, but not before killing 20,000 Persian soldiers. Oh my gosh, could you imagine that? 300 people against 20,000 or killing 20,000 other soldiers? Well, it wasn't just actually 300. I know, like in the movie, which is an awful movie, by the way, uh, 300. Um, And in other legends, it's like, oh, 300 versus the Persian army. There was actually more than just 300. It's just really famous because Leonidas had his 300. But there was also about 6,700 other Greek soldiers there too, helping out in the battle. So that's just kind of one of those things where like legend over time has kind of twisted it to just 300, but there was more than just that. So how is this even possible? How does even, you know, 7,000 soldiers defeat 20,000 soldiers? Well, it really comes down to armor and weapons. So the Persian soldiers were armed very, very poorly. So they just had a lot of the time like farming tools. Like they didn't even have proper spears or swords or bows and arrows. That was all reserved really for the immortals. And their shields were made out of wicker. Yeah, like the wicker basket. And wicker really is not going to protect anyone. Um, and the 300 Spartans were very, very heavily armed in bronze. So you can see here, like this is what a Spartan soldier would have looked like. Way better than a wicker basket. So the Persians usually honor their dead enemies, but Xerxes was so mad at his loss of 20,000 soldiers that he cut off Leonidas's head and put it on a stick, which was very unheard of in the Persian culture. After the Persians left, Greek soldiers went back and buried the dead, and they made a statue of stone of a lion 40 years later to honor Leonidas. And the Persian army moved on to Athens. Dun dun dun. So, Spartans are leading the fight at Thermopylae. What are the Athenians up to? That's a good question. So Athens was really, really known for their navy. So they are going to be doing a battle right here to the south of Athens itself. This was called the Battle of Salamis. It is a navy battle. It was Athens versus Persia. You can see right here. It's in the Strait of Salamis. So you can see it's just this narrow, kind of windy like sea passage, and Athens is just up here to the north. The battle was happening at the same time as the Battle of Thermopylae. It's very narrow and rocky at the Battle of Salamis. But the Athens had one thing that the Persians did not, and that's something called the triremes. So here is an artist's rendition of a trireme. Name two things you notice about it besides being a boat. I already know it's a boat. Give me two other details. All right, so the trireme. This is some like nerdy historians made an like a new trireme like a few years ago and sailed it around Greece, um, which is kind of cool. So that's a modern day photo of a trireme. They are Athenian warships. They can go about 8 miles per hour, which you think is like, oh my gosh, that's nothing, but that's the fastest ship for its time. It had 170 rowers specialized to maneuver the ship, and they can make very sharp turns. They're very slim, so they can fit into those narrow waters at the Battle of Salamis. And they also have a really cool battering ram on the front, so they can sink enemy ships. So I'm just going to kind of give you the short and sweet of the Battle of Salamis. So the Athenian navy was led by this guy. His name was Themistocles. There we go. I pronounced it correctly. Athenians blocked the Persian ships from going through the strait. Um, and the Persian ships are really chunky and cannot maneuver well. So the Persian ships actually ended up hitting each other, and the Athenian ships would then ram into the Persian ships, and then sinking the Persian ships, which of course Xerxes was very angry about. And then the Athenians ended up winning, which was great, but the Persian army still got to Athens through the Strait of Thermopylae. So it was really kind of a two front that the Greeks were fighting. And since the Battle of Thermopylae was lost, Athens was then lost because the Persian army got there by land. Yeah, sad day, Greece. All right, so the Persians, they dominate Greece. The Persians destroy all Greek towns and cities as they move south. Athens evacuates all its people. Persian destroys the city of Athens in 480, and Persia takes over all of Greece. Athens is not done fighting, though. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But here is a photo of an archaeologist in the 1800s of Athenian art that had been destroyed by the Persians and then unearthed during excavations in the 1800s. So Athens still fights on. They still want to get rid of the Persians out of Greece. So the Athens military keeps fighting even after Athens is destroyed in 480. Between 480 and 477, Athens is the glue to keep Greece city-states united. Athens' navy is still the most overpowered thing out there and drives out the Persian army out of Greece in 477. Greece cities in mainland Anatolia and Cyprus are still under Persian rule, though. So remember, Anatolia is that landmass just to the east of Greece. Cyprus is an island just kind of to the southeast. That's still under Persian rule, though. Persia still sends military campaigns to take over Greece, hence why the Persian War lasts until 449. Here's an artist's rendition of the Athenians rebuilding Athens, under the leadership of Themistocles, by the way, the Navy captain. So again, here's kind of a map of everything we talked about. So again, Sparta, Athens. We talk about the Strait of Salamis. We talk about the Battle of Thermopylae. Here's Anatolia over here. Yeah. Oh, here's a picture of Cyprus, if you don't know where that is. So here's Athens up here. This is Cyprus. It's way over here. It was controlled by Greece until the Persians took it over, which makes sense because it's kind of far away from Greece. So let's wrap it up for today. Today we learned about the Persian Wars, the Battle of Marathon, the Hellenic League, the Battle of Thermopylae, Leonidas, Phalanx, Battle of Salamis, and a trireme. Next up, you're going to watch an Edpuzzle video about the 300 Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, which is U3-L8. You're going to answer the question at the end of the Ed puzzle on your study guide. So you're going to watch the Ed puzzle all the way through, and at the very, very end, there will be a question that you're going to answer on the study guide. And then after that, you are going to watch U3-L9 Alexander the Great Ed puzzle. That's the last Ed puzzle. Woohoo! So, questions. Email your teacher, either me or Mrs. Hinkle. If you want to learn more, you're more than welcome to email me. My office hours are Monday from 12 to 1. Mrs. Hinkle's are Wednesdays from 2 to 3. And if you're in my class, make sure you do that weekly check-in. Or else that's all I got for you. I hope you all have an awesome day. Let me know if you have questions. Bye.